Good evening, everyone. It's November 18, 2012. I'm Rene Ritchie, and tonight we're going on a world tour with the founder of BlackBerry.com, Kevin Michaluk. This is the iMore Show. Joining me tonight is the Chief Media Officer of Mobile Nations and the founder of BlackBerry.com, Kevin Michaluk. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing excellent, Rene. Thanks for having me on this show tonight. You're taking a big risk having me here. So
it's not a well. Let me just credential you before we go any further, because a lot of people know you as Crackberry Kevin, but you are actually the person behind everything that goes on Mobile Nations, from Android Central to WebOS Nation and back again.
I don't know if I'd say behind everything, but I'm definitely a driving force behind the scenes that's uniting our mobile nations and pushing our sites further ahead every single day, cracking a whip. And people keep telling me my enthusiasm for life is infectious. So I'm trying to just be an infection across the internet.
I have fondly said that you are the little squirrel at the end of Over the Hedge when he drinks the Jolt Cola and time stops around him.
Pretty much, yeah. I don't know how. I just hope I live to be an old man. That's my only fear right now is, I don't know how much Jolt I can drink. And actually right now I have Chris Parsons, aka Blaze, in Winnipeg, and I'm learning from his school of blogging, which is to drink only full throttle all day long. He doesn't really believe in water or anything else. It's just full throttle, full throttle, full throttle.
But I think it's fair to say that you have your fingers at least in every bit of the pie. Like you have you help with the upgrades of every site, the technology behind them, and you're aware of what's happening with every one of the platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love being behind the scenes, working with the tech guys, working on the editorial teams. I've always loved the business side of the operations too on the e-commerce front. I mean, my background is not a tech blogger. My background is not a journalist. I am, I tend to be a professional fanboy of sorts who's an entrepreneur, and I'm very competitive. I like to always be in a fight against something and always trying to better myself. I'm like the GSP of mobile. I just will keep coming at you and getting better and getting better. And, I'm just fortunate that we have such a great team to work with. It's, since I got into this gig back in '06, I've never had a boring day. It doesn't feel like work or a job. I also, because of that, don't really stop ever working, according to other people, but, it's all good. No complaints.
And, people may not appreciate this because a lot of people do know you as Crackberry Kevin, or they do know you from Mobile Nations, but we think that we have celebrities in the Apple blogging world, but I have seen you at CES, and the CEO of Mobile Nations actually just accompanied you to an event in Waterloo, and he was tweeting it. You actually have people coming up to you for autographs, people asking for photos. I don't know what the right terminology is, but you're the closest thing we have to a blogging celebrity in the BlackBerry world.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how that evolved over time. I think, part of it is staying power. I mean, I outlasted the CEOs, the founders of the company, right?
This is true.
I think I've amassed more Twitter followers and engaged readers over the years than they did. And I think the big thing is I'm pretty, some would say shameless, but I just like what I'm doing. So I will do a lot of memorable things. I think if you look back through the years and sum them up, and with those memorable things, people don't seem to forget. So whether it's, buying $500 clock apps, or taking your shirt off on the internet and jumping around, or, trying to pick up chicks for accessory reviews, and ultimately getting engaged to one, I guess. But,
yes, that worked out pretty well for you.
That worked out great. I'll do stupid things all the time and love joy. Oh, look, in the chat room even, Natasha says, Kevin does stupid things all the time. That's why he is epic. Thanks, Natasha.
But I mean, you called yourself a fanboy, but that's not exactly fair. You're more of a platform champion because you're also one of the first people to call out RIM or any of the companies associated with them when you think they're going the wrong way. Exactly.
And I think platform champion, I can't remember if I coined that term or you did when we were debating it one day and talking about our sort of position in the mobile tech space. And that's exactly what I feel we are. And specifically in BlackBerry, that's what I am. And I think it's something that RIM needed and Crackberry and myself delivered over the years is, Apple going back through the decades has always had its group of core fans, its fanboys, and a company like RIM, if you think about it, going back to, '05, '06, '07. I mean, this is an enterprise company, a lot of suits, kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
Helping business people get work done. And with Crackberry launching, we really gave RIM a a fan club and an enthusiast base that they would never have built otherwise, I don't think. And the thing is, the enthusiasts were out there, right? But we made it okay to be an enthusiast.
You gave it a cachet.
And we gave it a home, and we followed through, I think, I would say every single day since that site went live. I don't think there's ever a day when we're not on top of that game. And we're very pragmatic. We very much, like you said, it's not blind fanboyism. That's the last of it, right? Yeah. I want to love BlackBerry because it rocks, not just because we run a site about it. And, you know, we need to do that. You know, it's legitimate. I want to see RIM do well and win. That doesn't mean they have to win at the expense of other people, but I want them to have their carved out spot in the mobile world. And that means calling them out on mistakes, being harsh on them, which, you know, if you read through the years, I think there's a lot of times when we're harsher than anybody else on the company. We try to steer the company. I mean, the way I've always looked at it is we're not a media property. I mean, we're really glue in that mobile ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And we're there between, you know, the manufacturer, the owners, the carriers, the accessory companies, the developers, everybody. And when the ecosystem grows, we grow. And when it shrinks, we shrink, obviously. So we always want to see it growing. And we try to make everybody in that ecosystem a better, more compelling player. So
I get the feeling, though, that you don't want to just say that BlackBerry is the best. You want BlackBerry to actually be the best. And that's the difference.
And be the best for certain people. It doesn't have to be the best for everybody. And you know, if I think back to some of our earlier cross-platform discussions going back years now, we always said, like, it's think automotive industry, right? Mm-hmm. You know, people don't all drive the same car. I mean, some people need minivans, some people want sports cars, and it all depends what they want to do. They'll all get you from point A to point B. Some will get you there faster, some will get you there more reliably. And I think that's sort of the mobile world we live in today, and that I'd like to see exist. You know, I think it would be a shame if the world ultimately evolved into everybody carrying the same handset. I think that would be bad. That would be everybody just boring. Accepting compromise, right? Yeah. You know, there's compromise there to arrive at that sort of product. And if you want me to segue, I'll say right now, you know, my experience with the last iPhone and iOS, Apple's built a product that is good at everything and great at nothing. All
right, well, let me set the stage for your segue. So while you're waiting for BlackBerry 10, which is supposed to launch in January, you've been doing Crackberry Kevin's world tour. You spent a month with Android with an HTC One X, and you spent a month now with an iPhone 5.
It's been actually longer than that, even, because originally I think, you know, BlackBerry 10 was supposed to come to market right now. It should have been here end of October. So they delayed it into Q1 2013. So I spent more like a few months with Android and a couple months with it. I mean, when did the iPhone 5 come out? I pretty much used it until last week. Yeah, like until Friday I switched over.
Beginning mid-September.
Yeah, so I mean, over a month on the iPhone. So I've been spending a lot of time on the competition.
And it's not your first iPhone. You've had iPhones almost since they first came out.
I've had every single iPhone. Every single one I've gone out and bought over the years. You know, for times, like days, I've crossed over to make it a primary driver, but this is the longest time where I've actually used it and fully put, you know, a BlackBerry and my BBM pin and everything just in a drawer and said, okay, I'm now an iPhone user for a while. And it's really interesting because honestly, these days, I can exist on any platform and be pretty happy. You can get, you know, again, driving from point A to point B, I can pretty much do it on everything.
Which wasn't the case just like a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Exactly. There was big gaps, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there used to be big gaps when you were picking up devices. And now they'll all get you there, which is good. I think, you know, I put a perspective to my evaluations of the platform, and I think you have to, because you know, if you just pick up a phone and you kind of throw yourself into the ecosystem, you really can be a happy Android user, a happy iOS user. And I set priorities for myself. I mean, Rene, I've shared my personality profile with you, right? I am that sort of type A, competitive, heavy communication type person.
And you actually wrote Crackberry Kevin's hierarchy of smartphone needs at one point.
Absolutely. And it's evolved over the years. And when I wrote that a couple of years ago, basically I said, you know, if you wanted a no compromise mobile solution, you pretty much needed two devices. You needed a BlackBerry for that communication experience, and then you needed an iPhone or iOS device or something like it for that full app ecosystem, big touch screen, you know, big web browsing experience. And now the technology is getting better. We're putting more and more into one device. So are we there yet where you can have one device that offers no compromise? I would argue not quite yet, but BlackBerry 10 could be the one that gets the closest. But there are some pretty interesting products on the market that are fairly no compromise in some respects, but then they're also maybe compromising. You know, looking at something like Android and a a Galaxy Note 2, which is a pretty big honking device that does a lot well, but then it's no longer a phone and it's not very user friendly to carry in your pocket.
Android is almost becoming like a sub ecosystem where you have a whole bunch of choice within Android as well as between Android and other platforms.
Yeah, we'll talk about Android later. I mean, I keep finding Android's becoming Samsung. So pretty soon you can just quit calling it Android and just call it Samsung.
All right. So getting back, you were saying that in the last month, you spent almost full time on the iPhone. I have the iMessage trail to prove this if anyone wants to see it. Good at a lot of things, but not great. Was that your conclusion?
I wouldn't say that's quite the conclusion. I'd say Apple has done a lot of things that so here's two things I'll say. First off, one, I feel bad for Rene and any editor in chief on our sites, because as soon as I pick up a phone from their platform, I start messaging them daily with questions or things I hate. So, Rene would get phone calls randomly saying, "What the hell, Rene?" And I'd blame all of iOS's problems on him personally, as if he's the one responsible for it being bad. Middle
of the night, and God forbid it was his girlfriend who was having the problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true too. Interesting. I made Erica finally buy an iPhone because same thing with her. She's always used a BlackBerry. She's always said to me, I like pushing buttons, which is true. She loves pushing buttons, but I wanted her to try an iPhone. I said, Erica, and it's awesome that you love BlackBerry, but when BB10 comes out, I want you to like it for its merits, not because I just shove it at you. So I made her switch to iPhone for a while. So that's been a separate. That might be a discussion for a separate podcast. We can get the wives and significant others of mobile nations people on the show to debate some of that.
Awesome. But it is fresh eyes, right? I mean, because I spend every day, all day, only using an iPhone. I know how to maximize its strengths and how to overcome its weaknesses. But you're looking at it, and Erica's looking at it from someone who's just coming to the platform.
Yeah, and Erica's almost a good one to talk about, because for her, people always refer to iOS as being really simple, and absolutely. When I said, obviously Apple's doing something right, it's the number one company in the world, which also means I feel happy, sort of not insulting, but
no, they can take it. Yeah,
they can take it, right? They can take it, and it makes it that much easier to kind of
they'll cry themselves to sleep on their $178 billion pillow.
And it's funny, like I use that iPhone 5 and I look at Erica as a first-time iOS user picking it up, and I'm like, you know what? It's a good thing Scott Forstall's gone, because that first iPhone, and maybe the second one, was a simple UI. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of stuff in iOS 6 that's stupid. And if you've evolved with the platform over the years, you've picked it up and it's just second nature. You don't think
or you've ignored it and you still don't know that it's there.
Yeah, exactly. But for something like her, case in point, she's using the phone. She installs the Sirius XM app on it. We have, Sirius. She's streaming music. That's what's in her car, so she knows it. So she doesn't want 10 separate streaming things. She likes her Sirius XMU station. We kind of share accounts, so sometimes I'll log into it. So on her iPhone, she gets the message saying you've been logged out because another user logged in. And with that app, if you just hit the home screen and close it, Sirius doesn't close. Mm-hmm. So you have to fully close the app in order to restart it. Once I log out, she can get back in. Well, and I explained this to her over the phone. I'm like, okay, Erica, to close an app, double click, the home screen button. Yeah. And that's like, what? And I'm like, just tap it twice quick. So she does. And then I'm like, okay, now scroll over to the Sirius. Wait, but I'm like, wait, it's not there, because she was still in the app when she did that the first time. So I'm like, close to the home screen first, so you're not in the app. Now double tap. Now you'll find it. Okay. Now press and hold on it. What do you mean press and hold? Like just put your finger on it. Don't move it till this little red circle comes up. Now hit the button. Oh, I'm like, how is that intuitive or easy or anything else? It doesn't make any sense. And there's a lot of things through iOS that are sort of like that. I mean, case in point, I call Rene Ritchie up and I say, Rene, how the heck do I mark an email as unread? Because where Apple hit it, it's the stupidest place ever, right? Yeah. Like it's obviously not for people.
Or how to attach a picture that almost made you lose it.
Oh, attaching a picture still floors me. So I tap in an email, get a pop-up for copy paste, tap to the right, and then I can insert something. I'm like, just give me the gun already, and it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of stuff that I feel like Apple doesn't want to solve these problems, or over the years, they've become a series of Band-Aid fixes over what originally was an incredibly elegant, simple OS. I don't know if you can still call iOS elegant.
Well, isn't that interesting that when in 2007, iOS was the newest, most modern mobile operating system on the planet, and when BlackBerry 10 launches this January, iOS will be the oldest mobile operating system on the planet.
Yep. And it was pretty funny. I did an interview with CNBC following the BlackBerry Developer Conference in September there. And you know, the guy, it was big show, right? Big interview live. And I brought that up with him too. It caught him off guard because people don't really think that way. I mean, being the oldest ecosystem, oldest OS and operating system platform is good in a lot of ways because it means you're filled out, right? It took Apple a lot of years to fill out the features on the operating system, fill out the App Store. And now it's complete. So you're buying into a very robust, well-developed platform. But this is the problem BlackBerry ran into. You know, they started with a platform over a decade ago now. They hit their 5 years where they were dominant. And then in the meantime, you know, other competition is planning out the next 5 years, the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So what RIM started with, they never envisioned doing the things with the platform that they've ended up doing with it. So they put a lot of time and energy into, you know, hacking stuff together to make it do more than it was ever initially intended to do. I think Apple started in a position thinking much further ahead than, you know, say RIM or Palm did in the early days. And they're experiencing that. But the way it's being described to me now by a lot of people in the industry is that, you know, iOS is really a phone and tablet OS. And the shift we'll see over the next 5 years plus is the shift to mobile computing. And the current iOS platform is not a mobile computing platform. It is a phone tablet platform. And it'll be interesting to see what Apple does to do that, because eventually the demands of users and developers are going to maybe start to outstrip what's there. Now, of course, Apple has Mac OS. They're a computing company. So I think they're well positioned to adapt to that. But a good example, for example.
Oh, before you go on, let's go back for 1 second. So when the iPhone first launched, and I think you had a really good point there, it did not do what the Trio 680 did at the time, what Windows Mobile did at the time, what BlackBerry did at the time, but people were willing to forego MMS, apps, all sorts of what, you know, people like us who were in other mobile devices would consider core functionality just because the multi-touch user interface was such an interesting experience. And companies like RIM kind of looked at it and said, oh, it's just stupid. No, people want keyboards. They want, you know, data compression. But it turns out that we as human beings were willing to put up with a lot less, that we just enjoyed doing more. And that caused a lot of consternation in the smartphone community at the time.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I'm going to defend not RIM, but people at RIM. There were absolutely people at RIM who, the moment Steve Jobs unveiled the original, you know, Apple iPhone, the emails were frantic and people were saying, holy shit, it is time to rebuild right now. Don't even, you know, we need that army and that internal army to rebuild and build a new platform that is built for this. And there were a lot of people at RIM who said that. Unfortunately, the people who make the executive decisions did not say that, and they wasted a lot of time adapting an operating system that was never built for an immersive touch experience to try to do it. They had some horrible devices like the BlackBerry Storm and Storm 2, which, you know, conceptually maybe it could have worked, but it just, the execution wasn't there and the final product was not there once it was in people's hands. And even from a review perspective, it actually didn't get horrible reviews. But then as you started to use it more and more, it fell apart, right? So eventually they did, you know, rebuild, and, you know, this is the new platform that is ultimately launching in BB10, but it took a long time. But you're right. A lot of people looked at Apple when they came out, and a lot of people underestimated it.
It's a toy. That was a common refrain.
It was a toy. It wasn't a phone. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it was...
People wanted a toy.
Well, it's not even that. I think the average smartphone scared a lot of people off. I mean, remember, there was, you know, now we're hitting a global phone market. But in 2007, there's a lot of talk about, well, the feature phone market and the emerging smartphone market. Yeah. And, you know, RIM and Palm and these companies owned, you know, 20, 30, 40% of the smartphone market, but it was only a 200 million device market or something like that. You know, it wasn't a massive market yet. And when the iPhone came out, I guess that was the question. Without apps, it felt like a fancy feature phone. So the smartphone companies kind of dismissed it, even though it was doing more. But between the sexy hardware, the touchscreen, and simplicity of it, it was very attractive. And Apple was able to throw, you know, good marketing at it, polished experience. They put the Apple magic on it, and then
they added apps, and then they added other, you know, they kept adding stuff to it.
Yeah, and their invention of apps, which of course, they didn't invent. I mean, smartphones have had apps for years, although I guess to Apple's credit, I think, even myself, we used to refer to it as software applications.
Yeah.
We didn't call them apps.
But they made a very simple buying experience that even my mom could use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, they sure did. And it worked for them. So they got momentum, and, Steve Jobs said it would take, Apple was 5 years ahead. And I think if you look at it, that was probably the case. But now that 5 years is basically up.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at it too, Android, Google was making something that was like a BlackBerry, like a Windows Mobile. They saw the iPhone, and to their credit, they pivoted on a dime. And now they're smart enough to not just coast on that, but as much as Apple doesn't have a lot of stuff built into iOS that arguably it needs, Android is going back and they're using Project Butter. They're trying to refine the user experience, prioritize UI rendering. Android 4, up to Android 4.0, it was so horrible. It was like fingernails on a chalkboard for me to use it. But now 4.1 is better. 4.2 is even better. And I get the sense that they are willing to fix things that are wrong. And to your point earlier, to bring this all back to the iPhone, there are several areas about the iPhone that concern me. Like, I don't know if Apple can easily build out the cloud infrastructure that companies like Google, I mean, and even Microsoft, to their credit, have been building out. Apple being the oldest OS now, I don't know how much time and effort they have to equal their competition at this point.
Well, I think the nice thing is Apple has quite a bit of time right now. I mean, look how long RIM has managed to hold on with a product that has become, good. It's still good at what it does, but inferior to the complete package that the competition's been offering for the last few years. And they're still hanging on, right? They're still selling devices. They're still in that position. Time's running out there. Apple has a lot of momentum. They have a lot of time right now to put the pieces in place so the same thing doesn't happen to them. It takes time. I mean, I always look at mobile kind of like sports teams, right? I mean, I'm a big Formula One fan. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Rene in Montreal, you get the GP there every year, and you always see it in there. It's never a team that just overnight has a success. It's putting a team in place, putting a winning platform in place. It has momentum. You do the things right. And, eventually things might shift, but it won't happen that overnight. Although that said, I mean, obviously Android popped up very quick and somehow amassed market share. But my Android discussion is always, it's not a company. It's a platform. I mean, Google's a company, but they're not selling really Google phones, excluding,
It's a much more complicated discussion than Apple or RIM.
Yeah, I mean, they became a union of sorts for feature phone companies, right? So all these companies that used to build crappy flip phones like Samsung and HTC and LG and Sony Ericsson, who couldn't build their own ecosystems, couldn't build their own compelling software platforms. Google solved their problem and saved those companies from early death by giving them a platform that was good, doing all the development on it, and giving them an ecosystem that they couldn't build themselves. Now, those companies right now are finding it very tough to make profit, a lot of them, like the HTCs and LGs. And that's where I said earlier, it's really becoming a Samsung game because Samsung is the one company making money off of Android really well. Arguably you have Amazon in there, but that's sort of a different play altogether.
And they're probably still at a loss ratio in Amazon.
Yeah. They're working towards a bigger picture and, they're still very US focused. It's kind of not the same conversation. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
So you were saying that, cause Apple's big thing was that they were bringing mobile computing where everyone else was making a phone. That was that famous Ed Colligan comment. No PC company is going to just walk in here and learn how to do this. And that's exactly what Apple did. They basically took OS X, stripped it down, put it on the iPhone, an incredibly regulated manner. And but now that, for example, Springboard, the interface, if you listen to our new show, Debug, I'm giving a little plug for it there, Guy English and Lauren Brichter were talking about how Springboard has now been split in two. You now have Springboard and Backboard, and Apple has ported over things like XPC, which could have profound implications for the actual home screen of the iPhone in iOS 7 or forward. But having used an iPhone now, Kevin, and having used Android and knowing what's coming in BlackBerry 10, the home screen on the iPhone is sort of just an app launcher experience still.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's, BlackBerry CEO Torsten Heinz likes to refer to the Apple experience as sort of this in-out paradigm. You're very much, opening apps, you're in them, you're closing back to the home screen and you're jumping around. And even if you use the task switcher, it's no faster than just going to the home screen and tapping back into an already open app. So it's kind of boring. You know, you do have your drop down now that gives you your, you know, weather and stock quotes and some of those things. But even that feels tacked on a little bit to iOS. It doesn't seem super smooth all the time. And
the multitasking stuff to iOS is what the smooth scrolling stuff is to Android, like an effort to go back and re-engineer something they didn't get right to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just exactly. So yeah, it's kind of a boring experience. I mean, it works though for a lot of people. It's simple. I mean, a 3-year-old can use it, a 4-year-old can use it, a 2-year-old can use it.
My mom loves it. Like for my mom, the home button is an escape hatch. Yeah. No matter where she is, if she gets lost or confused, she presses the home button, sees all her apps, and then presses the app she wants.
Yeah. The problem I see with it now is I think that experience works on a tablet because honestly, again, I've had every iPad, and in a lot of ways, I prefer the iPad over any other tablet I've had to date still. But a big part of that is the way I use a tablet, which is, okay, I'm sitting down on the couch. I'm going to do one thing for 30 minutes, read a book, play a game. I don't want to get inundated with information and stuff while I'm in those sort of experiences on a tablet. On a phone, when I'm truly mobile, it's a different experience. I want to be connected. I want to not miss anything. I want all of the information in my personal sphere of everything to come in, whether it's news or messages. And I want to be able to very quickly get out there too. And I think that's where, iOS isn't that experience is falling behind. So on Android, you have your widgets, which again, problem with Android is the way most people buy it and the average person does nothing to customize it. That's sort of a huge problem because you never get a great experience. But if you customize the heck out of Android, you figure out the way it works optimally for you. That home screen experience tends to be a lot more, friendly to the user than I think sort of your straight app launcher row of icons or the pull down menu. Live tiles on Windows Phone, I'm spending more time with now. I'm actually finding that to be, I don't get a lot of useful info out of it, the way I have it set up. So it's kind of like a glorified app launcher that's a little more pretty, but there's not a lot of data coming at you in it.
See, the problem I have with these, and tell me if I'm nuts, but the problem I have with both Android or widgets, because remember Matt Miller was showing us widgets on this Nokia Meebo or whatever they were called, Moblin.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, whatever they were. It's like years ago, they already had that kind of stuff. I don't like live tiles and I don't like widgets because I have to go get the information. And I feel we're at a point in technology now, and I think I've seen a little bit of this in BlackBerry 10, so you can maybe tell us a little bit about that home screen in a minute. But I like the idea of information that comes to me, whether it was WebOS notifications or now Android's actionable notifications. Because if I'm in my app, I don't want to leave to even look at a widget. I just want the drop down to come down, let me enter a text message and send from there. Let me readjust an alarm. I'm lazy. I don't want to have to deal with home screens at all anymore.
Oh, sure. It makes sense. And I think, with RIM, there are two value propositions in BlackBerry 10 there's a lot of value propositions they'll be pitching, but two that directly speak to this. One is their BlackBerry quote, flow experience, and the other one is the BlackBerry Hub. So BlackBerry Flow is this ability to, very quickly move around the operating system and apps. So you're never sort of breaking the experience. So even that home screen button on iOS that you have to physically push in and out, Apple's doing it with RIM's doing it with a swipe up gesture in BlackBerry 10. And, the way apps that are open minimize to the home screen, they're open, right? So the apps you're using are always open and right there. So there's very little lag as you jump back and forth between apps. You just kind of swipe and tap or swipe and let go and you're always there. And then when it comes to all this messaging, the communication side, so whether it's emails or texts or tweets or Facebook messages, etc., and they're opening that API up to third-party developers, they're giving you access to this unified inbox on steroids from anywhere in the OS. So if you're playing Angry Birds or you're playing, browsing a website or something, and you see that red light blink, you can very easily gesture and basically slide in that inbox, kind of peek into it, see what came in.
And that kind of also solves the big screen problem, because in iOS, they kept the screen small so you could hit every part of the screen with your finger, where in Android, you can't do that. And BlackBerry is going to have a big screen, but because of where the peak happens, right, it's still one-handable.
That's the plan, right? They're keeping, I'd say, as much of the experience as one-hand friendly as possible. I think there are exceptions where you're still going to be forced to go back to two hands. It happens on iOS too, right? I mean, if you're working at the top of the screen, depending on how you hold it, your finger size and all that, it's very hard to make an absolute one-handed experience on a full touchscreen, but they're definitely putting that in there. But yeah, the BlackBerry Hub is really interesting. And I mean, speaking to iOS, like again, they've done a much better job with notifications where you get these pop-up notifications. but I find them really aggravating. I find it so funny that RIM is the only one who's stuck to that black red light or the blinking red light because it works. It gives you less information than an iOS pop-up, which tells you on the screen what just came in. But I hate it because it screws me up all the time. I'm literally playing a game or something. I'm in the middle and then all of a sudden I get a text message or, a tweet comes in and I get this pop-up on the screen. It screws up my game flow. I die. It's like, thanks for ruining my game.
Well, now you have banners though. I mean, they got rid of the pop-ups and now you just have little banners at the top of the screen.
Wow. Doesn't that still screw you up though if you're playing?
No, well, you can throw them away. Like you can just, I ignore them, but you can quickly throw them away if you want. But the thing that
I like the blinking red light because then I can choose to go to it when I want to. I don't need to get interrupted on the fly. So
see, one of the things I find it like Apple's a little confusing in that we have much better gesture notification on the iPad than we have on the iPhone. And granted, the iPhone screen is smaller, but I would still love to be able to gesture between apps and not have to go back to the home screen each time. I do that automatically on the iPad. It's not surfaced at all on the iPhone. I did have your BlackBerry for a while in our last smartphone round robin. It was the BlackBerry 9000. And what I found was because after I would start ignoring that light. Like, the first few times I checked it religiously, but then I'm like, oh, I'm too lazy. I'm not checking it. And it was just forever on. So it was just no notifications at all for me at that point.
That's a good point, right? Especially these days. I mean, and at that point, it was probably mainly text messages and emails.
BBM, yeah.
Now the problem is you can set that light off for everything,
yes.
Right? I mean, there's an unending flow if you start hooking up Facebook and Twitter and that of information. So it depends. I mean, all the phones, you can customize your notifications and set it up. But I think that's the thing RIM's after there with the hub and flow of it all is to fill in the gaps they've had in terms of apps and web browser and everything else, but keep that core BlackBerry user experience and put emphasis on communication still, not lose it. So when I kind of harped on Apple at the beginning of the show saying, it's good at everything, but great at nothing, what RIM wants to do is be great at communication still while being, great at a few other things and good at everything else, but hopefully bad at nothing.
What's exciting now is that the smartphone market, like you've said for a while now, the smartphone market is just becoming the phone market. And because that's happening, we're actually getting niche and specific phones. Before, everything had to be a general phone. But now you have things like the Galaxy Note, which is if you want the world's smallest Wacom tablet that you can hold in your hand, there's a Galaxy Note. And Microsoft tried the Kin. It didn't work, but they tried making literally a phone for tweens. And BlackBerry is trying to make a phone for people who are, I forget the tagline you use, but for people who really want to get things done in as quick and smooth a way as possible.
Yeah, no, and I think the big thing here is, it's no longer a smartphone / feature phone market. It's becoming a global market built of smartphones. And when you look at the population of the world and the market opportunity, there is room for a company like Samsung to put out a Galaxy Note 2, which isn't going to appeal to a lot of, a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, what the heck? But if you add up all the people with, Shaquille O'Neal sized hands and big pockets, that's enough people for them to build that phone, get not even all of the market, but a good portion of it, get the economies of scale to make profit off of it.
People who don't want a tablet, but want something more than a phone. I mean, they're showing that there's niche markets out there, which is nice.
No, and I think with RIM, I think they're, obviously they want to aim as high as possible. I don't know what their internal metric for success will be on the launch of BlackBerry 10. They're not expecting to win market share back to number one overnight. But I think what they're after is probably, 1 in 5 people. And what they want is the people who it appeals to, who have that personality profile, kind of like mine. They want to deliver an experience that when those people use it, and the odds are they're already smartphone owners who have used either a BlackBerry or a different smartphone before. They want people to get what it's good at, appreciate what it's good at, get addicted to what it's good at, and that's it, and then for those people, that is the phone they're going to want. That's the platform they're going to want. And I think equally important for RIM at this, BlackBerry 10 launch is just to educate the rest of the market. So the 4 to 5 people who BB10 might not appeal to make them understand who BlackBerry is for and what BlackBerry is good at. And I think that's one of the missing things right now is there's a lot of confusion out there on the marketing front.
I'd argue there's a lot of misreporting too, because I read Crackberry's coverage of an event and I read mainstream coverage of an event, and it's sometimes night and day. Sure,
but I'm even talking buying devices. Like, Microsoft right now is trying to launch Windows Phone 8, and even I'm having trouble while using the phone now, deciding who it's built for. Because I think Microsoft Office, I think, PCs in the workplace a lot. And then I started using this phone, and Marcus, if he's still in the chat room too, he got it a few days before I did. And he's going bonkers because, he gets a lot of emails a day. Like, we're all guys who get hundreds of emails in a day.
Yeah.
You open this big 4.5 inch or 4.3 inch touchscreen, whatever it is, on this Lumia 920. And how many emails can I see at one time?
Like 4.
4. 4 emails on a massive screen. Can I change the font size? No. How the heck is this? Like, who is this for? I'm the kind of guy who focuses on utility first, right? And this is the thing, and this is my thing that I find so interesting in mobile. And again, you spoke about it already with the iPhone, where, the original iPhone had a lot of compromise to it and missing features, and people were okay with it because of the aesthetics and what it did well and everything else. And I'm a person who focuses on utility first. If it's, I will take the thicker phone if it has a lot better battery life than having to have the thinnest phone. And, bringing it back to Apple, that's one thing I find, that they make a lot of choices based around what they want to do in a product. And I think in some ways it comes at the expense of what's actually best for the consumer.
The thing about Apple, and I wish Microsoft had more of this, and I think RIM had, the thing I always liked about Apple and RIM, and maybe it's because they were an integrated company, Palm when they were vibrant too, is they were opinionated companies. Whether it was good or bad, they had a huge belief in the kind of phone they wanted to make. And from the CEO of the company on down, they're passionate about those phones. And if anything went wrong, they were down in the basement throwing it at somebody's head. And I never got the sense from Microsoft or Google that the people who owned the company cared at all beyond having a screen in that space. And I think that's why it took them a while to kind of, get some wind in their sails.
I think that's a fair statement, Rene.
The other thing that was interesting to me is I went to this charity event on Friday, and usually when I go out in Montreal, I see half BlackBerries, half iPhones. It's a Canadian city, very close to, Waterloo. People love their BlackBerries here. This time I went out, there were a couple BlackBerries still, a lot of iPhones, very few iPhone 5s, mostly iPhone 4, 4Ss still. There were quite a lot of Samsung Galaxy S3s, not Android devices. Not Android devices at all. Samsung Galaxy S3s. And I asked everyone that I could why they bought it. And to a person, they said, because the screen is huge. I love big screens. Apple did not go with a big screen, but I think RIM is going to go with it. Do you think that Apple is missing out on the big screen market, or is that a market that they just don't need to compete for?
I'm sort of surprised they have not done what they just did with tablets, is go after both. There are definitely people who like the current size of the iPhone. Again, my fiance, a bunch of her girlfriends are all, iPhone users. And it was funny because one night they came over, and inevitably these days, every conversation starts with phones. This wasn't me starting a conversation. This is just them drinking and talking. And it was funny to listen to because for half of them, they had the iPhone 5. Half were on 4Ss or 4s or a couple older ones too. And the prevailing thought from all of them was that the iPhone 5 was now too big, and they preferred the iPhone 4 because they're little girls with little hands, and the bigger screen guys made it less easy to reach to the top. And they didn't care about the lighter weight of the iPhone 5. Yeah. They cared that it was becoming a little less easy for them to use. So for all those girls in that argument, they couldn't care less about the S3's big screen size because the iPhone 5 was too big for them already. However, there's a lot of people in the world who prefer a big screen. For me, I went from the HTC One X and the Galaxy S3 to the iPhone 5. And I think I said to you when I first got it, this thing is just way too small. Yeah. And it probably took me a solid week, maybe even 2 weeks before I forgot the size of the S3 and One X. Cause when I first switched, I felt like what am I doing? I felt like I was holding it in front of my face. And honestly, I think I am holding it a little bit in front of my face still. Because those big screens you really get used to them. But that said, the iPhone, you get used to it. It's a size you can get used to it. At first, I was like, the icons are so tiny to tap on. I need it to be so accurate. Everything's so crushed together because of the physical size. And, I open a web browser and I look at a page loaded, and yes, the Retina display still is great, but I'm like, it's so small. I'm like this all the time, even though it's clear and everything. So I think for sure, they should go into a bigger screen size, but I don't think it would be smart for them to only do it because there's a lot of people who like the current size of the iPhone. And
Samsung has phones now at every half-inch interval.
Sure.
Which
is crazy too, right? They're still swinging for a lot of devices. I think what they proved with the S3 is, they're trying the Apple approach there, which is let's not launch on one carrier in the US and throw some commercials at that and give it a stupid name of a device and then throw this one at Verizon. They did a global launch with one phone with the same name. They threw a whack load of marketing dollars at it.
Well, it was even better than that. They made two phones and gave it one. I mean, when we were trying to make the chart with Jerry and Phil, there's actually two different Galaxy S3s, totally different processor architecture. Any other company, like Apple would have called those iPhone 4 and iPhone 4S. Samsung made one brand, and I think it worked brilliantly for them.
They had to do it, right? Yeah. And we've said this, going back to years ago, even with things like when it was Windows Mobile and BlackBerry and Palm. And I always made fun of Windows Mobile in the respect that there was no brand equity, nothing built up. So you had the Samsung Galaxy, or the Samsung Blackjack, or the Motorola Q9 or Q9H, and all these phones were actually pretty cool, some of them. But between the single carrier launch, like a couple commercials, they never had, a 3-month lifespan, not a year lifespan. The brand awareness ever built up. So then you had a company like BlackBerry with, good products that were okay. But every commercial, everything they did built up that one brand, that one name, and it really worked for them.
You bought a BlackBerry, and then after that, you worried about what kind. There wasn't.
Yeah. And I think it's different right now still. It's
interesting. Phil Nickinson, who runs Android Central for Mobile Nations, just came back from New York with the Droid DNA, which is a 1080p phone. It has 1920 by 1080 pixels at 440 pixels per inch, which to me sounds like pornography. It doesn't sound like any reason you need to have that on a device. And I know if Apple wants to compete with that, they're going to have to go to Super Retina display at 4X, insane like 600 pixel density to keep everything the way it is now. I don't know if RIM has any intention to compete at the 5-inch 1080p form factor. But I don't know if it's like megapixels on camera phones anymore, where we're missing the point. It shouldn't be about how many, but it should be about how good.
Yeah, it's something for them to market and try to get out there, but I don't think they have any grand illusions that it's going to be amazing, for their sales, and they're going to all of a sudden take the market back with that device. I think they're just trying things with new suppliers, and they have they're cost effective enough at pumping that new hardware out, seeing what happens, keeping the revenue coming in on it, that they'll do it. I mean, my quote from Phil when he mentioned it, he's like, "Man, this display is really good." I'm like, "Is it any better?" He's like, "I don't know." So it's like, it's something to put into a commercial, and it's a line on a spec sheet that looks awesome, but I don't know if it's enough to change anything. And, I know for RIM, historically, they've never been the leader on specs. Yeah. Arguably, they've trailed too far behind. And part of that was with the old BlackBerry OS. I mean, literally every phone they built was like building a phone for the first time when it came to troubleshooting bugs. Anything they changed on the hardware at the architecture level, it took forever. They literally rebuilt the platform every single time for every phone. Right up to the last BlackBerry Bold 9900s and everything. With this new platform going forward, they can much more quickly put new hardware, new specs into it. I mean, the QNX platform already has forward support for 32 cores and that kind of thing.
You run nuclear power plants in cars.
Yeah, exactly. We have no issue. We run the routers that, Cisco uses on the backbone of the internet. I mean, we run the world with that platform.
You're the Matrix. That's basically what you're declaring here today. You're the Matrix.
So yeah, exactly. We are the Matrix. We will, or maybe we're the Borg. We will eventually hook it all together and just assimilate
Skynet.
I think that passed though the date, right?
Yeah. Well, no, they keep moving it forward every movie.
Oh, okay.
So the thing I really wanted to ask you about was you've had an iPhone over the years. You spent 1 month with it now. If Apple wants to win Kevin Michaluk as a customer, let's say you weren't the founder of BlackBerry. If you were just a customer who's been trying out different phones, what does Apple need to do in 2013 to win someone like you over as a customer?
So I think the phone, the size of the phone for me right now, I definitely feel like the small size of the screen is makes me feel like it's not the best product it should be, right? Because basically what you're saying, Rene, is I'm a guy who likes to buy the best, right?
Yes.
I'll throw away the dollars just to have the latest and greatest gadget. I don't care about my contract and all that. I'll just
you like nice watches, you like nice things.
Yeah, but I look at phones today and I think this whole 2-year contract thing's ridiculous. I mean, this is the device you use most in your life. I mean, the most in your life, which means I want to have the best thing. And this isn't like buying a new car. This is, an affordable, even off contract. The phone is affordable, to most, right? So I want the best. I think the size of the screen right now makes it feel to me like it's not the best anymore. Now the revelation I had with the iPhone 5 that I didn't have with the 4S or the 4 or the 3GS or the 3G or the 2, was Apple's take on one-handed use. Because I've written over the years a lot that I want a phone that I can use with one hand, right? And the old BlackBerry experience is arguably the best at that. You know, same with some of the old Trios in that, because I didn't need a touch screen. I had this little trackpad in the middle of the phone. I moved my thumb a half inch to the left, a half inch to the right. I have my menu key, my back button, the input. I could literally control that entire phone experience within a movement of a half inch. So if I'm, walking in a mall, if I'm, back in the day driving a car and using my phone under the boardroom table, I could get away with using it. And I always felt that the iPhone was more of a two-handed phone, right? Yep. Hold it in one hand, tap with the other. I still find it's like that for navigating a lot. But typing is the thing I want to take us off topic, because I don't want to miss this topic. So I've never, until the iPhone 5, been able to type with anything on an iPhone. And I've tried,
Was it the lack of a hardware keyboard, or was it just the way the iPhone does software keyboards?
So a couple of things. One, by default, I have two thumbs, and I'm a BlackBerry typer used to full QWERTY keyboard, so I want to use both my thumbs. To me, it felt inefficient to put one hand away and try typing with one thumb. But I would try to type two thumbs, and I found the physical width of the iPhone is too narrow for the size of my hands to comfortably type with two thumbs. Yeah. If it was just a little bit wider, I could do it. But I just could never do it with two thumbs. Sometimes I would then tap with one finger, but then all of a sudden it is a two-handed thing, and I'm, holding in my left hand, tapping, and I just felt like that wasn't right. But then it turned out, the iPhone 5 comes out, and they're like, we made the phone bigger, but we didn't make it wider because we value one-handed use. And I'm like, well, does that actually make sense? Like, what are they talking about exactly? And then I'm like, okay, I get it. So you hold in one hand, and reaching over to the left side of the phone, you can still reach icons okay. And then it turns out, I have some friends who work at Apple. And not that long ago, I talked to them. And what I discovered is everybody at Apple types with one thumb. Nobody at that company types with two thumbs. Nobody at that company types holding the phone in their left hand and tapping. They built that phone around one thumb. So then I picked up the iPhone 5 and I just put away that second thumb and I started typing as fast as I could, just with my thumb, relying solely on autocorrection. I can type like a machine on an iPhone now.
Yes.
And the key is, if you try to use two thumbs, basically autocorrection falls apart, because the way autocorrection has been tuned on that device, it's for one thumb mistakes. So only ever one point of entry. So if you make a mistake in around that one letter, you're fine. But if you start to type with the second thumb and kind of jump around too quick, it falls apart, because you start with that second thumb hitting a key outside where it was tuned for the one thumb mistake. So if I just go one thumb as fast as I can, it's really good. And then now I start watching people, and I hear people who complain about typing on the iPhone, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, try this out. And I'm like, go as fast as you can with one thumb. And all of a sudden it's pretty surprising how much better they are with it. So literally, I find it interesting that I've never heard Apple push that out as a message to consumers, like, here's how you type with an iPhone. I'm not sure if you've done it on the site, but honestly, if I were them, I'd be broadcasting, here's how you type with an iPhone. You've all been holding it wrong all these years.
You've been holding it wrong. Best practices by Apple.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you have them make, if knowing that now, would you still have them make a wider screen, or would you just have people type in that way?
Glad you asked that question. So then we jump to the One X and the Galaxy S3. And with both of those, you're pretty much forced to be a two-thumb typer, because with one thumb, you can't comfortably reach, or at least with my size of hands, I can't comfortably get to that far left side row. So I'm okay with that, because I'm kind of used to being a two-thumb keyboard typer. So that's fine, right? So I was like, that's okay. But I could see why Apple wouldn't want to shift to that, especially if they have a culture of being one-thumb typers. The compromise is honestly what BlackBerry's doing with BlackBerry 10. They're picking a device size with a 4.2-inch display, and, based on what we've played so far with the Dev Alpha devices, where I can still type one thumb with it. And their whole swiping words thing, where you can, words are showing up on the keyboard and you can swipe them up. That's a one-handed improvement. That's designed for one-handed typing. Because when you're walking in that, you're typing with one thumb, basically by layering those suggestions on the keyboard. You're not typing at a super fast rate. So being able to swipe up the words is actually making you a faster typer and a more accurate typer. And you can still do it with one thumb. Now, if you want to go two thumb to pound out, a long email to somebody, the keyboard is big enough to do it as you would on a BlackBerry with a physical keyboard. And, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Now, the problem with that swiping thing is once you go with two thumbs as fast as you can, you're typing at a far faster rate than you could ever, you have to slow down to swipe things. or you're actually covering up a lot of those suggestions with your thumbs. So if you're like a slow typer, it'll make you quicker. But if you're already a quick typer, you're just going to ignore those gestures. But basically, BlackBerry's created a keyboard that I think is the best of both worlds for one thumb.
Like a hybrid.
It's a bit of a hybrid.
Yeah.
You know, it's small. It's a big screen that's small enough to use one thumb, and they're giving you some keyboard tools to help speed up. But for two thumbs, you can go two. If you went as big as the S3 though, you lose that one-handed thing. So it becomes, hard to type in Drive, which maybe that is a good thing after all. One thing that drives me insane on the iPhone, and I don't understand, what licensing fee they just haven't paid or what for this. I hate when you make mistakes that you can't swipe to the left to delete a word. Yeah. With Swift key and that, you just swipe back on the keyboard, and it's so much better than having to find that little type. You have to actually find the backspace key on the iPad or the iPhone keyboard, and tap it. And that's just aggravating.
Yeah, there's no word delete gesture, which we really need.
Which is ridiculous. Like, pay who you have to pay, make that stuff work.
The other thing that keeps bothering you is notifications that go off with sound or buzzing while you're on a phone call.
If you are on a phone call, that is your priority, period. Okay? It doesn't matter what else is happening. Do not bonk at me or do anything at me when I'm on a phone call. I mean, it is distracting. Yeah. You're like answering questions. You're on work calls. Think of people who are in sales trying to close a deal. And then it's like bong. And you're like, and you lose your train of thought. And I hate it. The other thing I see, and that puts me on another point too, which is Apple doesn't think. Okay. So obviously in a lot of ways they think about how people use their phones. Mm-hmm. And then there's other ways like that example where they don't think about it. And they've never thought about it because they haven't changed it, 5 iPhones later, yep, or whatever number we're on now. Another example that drives me insane is using the phone for an alarm clock now. So one thing that BlackBerry did a few years ago, and it's brilliant, and it's something I think they need to actually put into commercials and show people more because they haven't done enough of it, is proper bedside mode. Yep. So you can go into your alarm clock and customize what you want for bedside mode. But basically, I think a lot of people, myself, and at least I, for myself, I charge my phone every night. Mm-hmm. That's my plan, is every night when I go to bed, my phone's on the charger. And, I like to use it as an alarm clock. So when I plug in my BlackBerry into my micro USB charger, immediately I get a pop-up. Now I can choose it to be automatic, but I prefer the immediate, the option. And it says, do you want to enable bedside mode? I enable it. At that point, the screen dims out to super dark. It just layers a nice little alarm clock in there. And then at that point, it turns off the blinking red light. It turns off all voice note, all notifications, except I choose to make the phone ring if somebody calls me. Yeah. Because if somebody rings in the middle of the night, I need to be able to know it's there. In the morning, when I, get up, I turn off the alarm or I set it to snooze. I unplug the phone. It automatically goes out of bedside mode. There's no forgetting. So I get that Apple's trying to get there a little bit with their VIP notification stuff, or
do not disturb mode.
Do not disturb mode.
Yeah.
But it's still garbage, So I turn on do not disturb mode, and then it's more of a complete do not disturb. And then when the biggest problem I have though is when I unplug the phone in the morning, all of a sudden it's 12 noon, and I'm like, why hasn't anybody called me? And then I have 7 missed calls. Because the thing's so stupid to not realize, hey, you might want to eventually take me out of do not disturb mode.
Yeah, it's timer based. It's not automatic based.
Yeah, it's not automatic, and it should be based on unplugging the phone or even geolocation. You know where I am. If I left my house, take me out of do not disturb, or at least remind me that I'm in do not disturb mode. So stuff like that drives me a little bit bonkers. The other thing, last week was a fail. Again, I went to Waterloo. Battery life I found on the iPhone 5 to be okay if you're in a good coverage area. Yeah. If I have Wi-Fi on, especially around the office and home, my average day I get through no problem. If you get into low coverage areas, like most phones, you start to eat through battery life a lot quicker because the radios crank up and suck back battery to maintain the signal strength. It just
screams for a signal.
It screams for signal. Yeah. Well, on Wednesday, I went to Wii Day at the Waterloo Auditorium there. So I'm in an arena, and I was using the personal hotspot to connect to my Dev Alpha so I could have BBM coming through a BlackBerry. The phone went from 100% to 10% in the course of an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
So the phone just died. And when I picked it up, I was like, oh my God, it's on fire. This thing
tethering is like a match.
It was burning up.
Yeah.
So then I'm in the car and I'm like, hey, with a person from RIM, and I'm like, hey, do you have a charger here? Well, of course, they have a micro USB charger.
Yeah.
I left in the hotel room my iPhone charger. So it was like, oh, lack of standard support, driving me insane. And it makes me so mad. And even, again, another thing I complained to you about. So the #1 company in the world can't put out a freaking adapter the day it hits the market. They're going to do a global launch with millions upon millions of iPhone 5s. And I had to wait, 6 weeks before I could get an adapter for it so I could still use the iPhone on my music docking station.
It was maddening.
So every single day, Miss Crackberry is yelling at me, why can't we listen to music anymore? And I'm like, well, because they haven't released an adapter.
Apple hates you.
Because Apple hates you is what I told her. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I couldn't even believe it. So
they can put the iPhone 5 in more countries than any company has ever deployed in the history of smartphones, and they can't get adapters into stores within 6 weeks.
That's just it. And I mean, if it's a proprietary standard you're pushing, you had better support your customers. And I mean, I think I said to you, I was almost angry that you weren't more vocal about it, because I think I would have been screaming every day, because I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Like, if it was micro USB or standards, I'm like, there's no issue, right? This is literally your own standard. You're screwing over your whole user base. You know, it's a bunch of people who are upgrading from their iPhone 4Ss or 4s to 5s. Yeah. Especially in that first month. So basically you took it out on your biggest fans to make their stuff not work anymore. And I was like, not cool, Apple. If you're #1 company in the world, that's to me unacceptable.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree.
So, but the standard thing is it's very interesting, right? Now, what I do love though is I actually just found I have the new BlackBerry Premium car charger here, which is micro USB, but then you can plug a second USB into it, so I can have my Lightning connector and micro USB. And you can buy those from shopcrackberry.com
They're actually an awesome value because they're cross-platform and they're incredibly cheap and they just work.
So good. This is like my unplanned commercial. I'm getting it though. Wait 1 second. It's so good. I want to show it.
All right, go. Now, it would be really cool if Chris Parsons jumped onto Kevin's chair while he was running.
Got it here as my headphones fall off. 3, 2, and we are... Okay, I'm back.
Nice.
See, look how good this is. So it's actually funny because RIM makes some really good accessories these days, but I think they don't really, people without BlackBerries don't buy them, but they really should. So it's this nice little car charger. How high do I have to hold this thing? And you can see in there, it just takes the...
A little higher. There you go.
The micro USB. So then I can plug my Lightning adapter in it. Really beautiful. And it's actually higher amperage than a standard phone one. So you can it'll charge your phone pretty much twice as fast without hurting it. So
I also love the BlackBerry Audio Gateway, which is just a little tiny Bluetooth box that works everywhere.
Yep, super handy, especially if you have like a more older school like audio system or car that doesn't have Bluetooth, right? Because then it takes your old stuff and actually makes it work with new technology.
It just works. I like that.
Okay, what else can we rant about here? I feel like there's lots to rant on.
Well, so again, I want to go back to my core question. What does Apple have to do in iOS 7 to win you over as a customer? What does Apple need to do next year to not become old to the point of being in trouble the way Windows Mobile, BlackBerry operating system and Palm OS were?
So it's hard to, for me, it's that communication experience that drives me nuts. I really find myself when I'm on iOS, I'm a less, my response time to everything is a lot slower. And I find in general, when I send emails or messages to iPhone owners, they in general are a lot slower to get back to me than everybody else, especially BlackBerry owners. I've always found BlackBerry owners are the quickest people to respond. Mm-hmm. So now my question becomes, is that a personality thing? Is it the, guns don't people kill people? So is this just the people who use BlackBerries are of that mindset, or is part of it the actual phone experience? And I would argue part of it is the phone experience. So BlackBerry, we're sitting at a loud restaurant, right? It's dark in that red light goes off. The BlackBerry owner will probably, respond to that persistent message quicker than the iOS message, which if you catch it the second it goes off is good, but then it disappears and your phone's just sitting there for 5 minutes now until, it comes back up again and reminds you. So getting notified of a message of any type, I find BlackBerry users are quicker. And then I think there's still this thing with BlackBerries to date, and we'll see if BB10 maintains it, and I hope it does. You don't have a mental block to responding. Responding to messages is so fast and natural with BlackBerries, partially due to the keyboards, partially due to the ease of just getting to your message and replying, that people, it's not like a pain, right? So they just reply. When I get an iPhone, if it's something I can reply to quickly, I do. But I find a lot of people that I talk to with iPhones, they're like, well, if it's not important, I'll just wait till I'm back at the office computer. Yeah. It kind of makes you into a lazier communication person. And actually, a lot of people I know also like that because they say, and, you know, waitresses at the bar, right? And phones come up a lot. And I was talking to a girl not too long ago, and this is kind of, this was her take on it. I thought it was really interesting because she's like, oh yeah, I use an iPhone now. It's like, oh, it's good. You know, I really like it. I used to have a BlackBerry. You know, I like that too, but I kind of like that I'm, you know, with my iPhone, I just don't use it as much. With my BlackBerry, I was just always on it all the time. Like,
it's less stressful.
It's less stressful to become this messaging person.
Well, I know that I miss, when I was jailbroken, I had Byte SMS, where an SMS would come in, you could reply to it in the app you were in. You didn't have to switch back to messages and then switch back, which is a pain in the ass. I think that's the kind of stuff Apple has to address now. Well, first, they have to nail their cloud architecture, because Google's a cloud company, Amazon's a cloud company,
Sure.
Microsoft has become a cloud company, RIM has always had the knock, they know how network operations. iMessage was down again today. FaceTime was down again today. Siri's been unreliable. Letterpress all by itself took Game Center down. Apple is not a cloud company yet, and they're going to be the only one. And it's not an easy problem to fix. It's much easier to make your phone look good, or to buy companies that make apps and buy designers that make apps, than it is to rebuild a cloud. And then they have to take all that cloud stuff and make it much easier for us to get to, because me pressing home button messages, home button back to the app, home button messages is not scalable.
Well, and this is you know, and that's not, we're talking native. My other thing becomes supporting third-party stuff. So Dropbox, for example, this was one thing I called you about. I remember I was complaining a few weeks ago. So I have Dropbox on my iPhone. I'm a big Dropbox user, use it daily, obviously. And I have it set to, I guess, upload when I connect to Wi-Fi. I don't think it does it over radio.
Mostly Wi-Fi, yeah.
Mostly Wi-Fi. So I go to my parents on the weekend, and, you know, a few weeks ago, we're building a cottage. So over the course of a day or a weekend, I'm taking, you know, 100 photos, probably 5 or 6 videos. There's a lot of data there. I come back to my home. I'm in Wi-Fi again, and, you know, okay, it kicks in, it starts to upload data. Well, every time I picked up the iPhone that evening, every 20 minutes, I'd get this message saying, you know, Dropbox has been turned off, because I guess it kills the process after 20 minutes.
It has 10 minutes to finish internet connection.
Yeah, so obviously it probably had 3 hours of uploading to do behind the scenes here, and it couldn't do it because it just kept killing it. And I'm like, this is crap. Like, this is real garbage. So, you know, your cloud interfacing stuff is just garbage here. And I think that's, to me, one of these things where it's a phone, it's still working like a phone OS and not thinking about mobile computing and the way I now as a consumer want to use my device and expect it to work. So it's literally that Apple's falling behind my expectations. And I think previously Apple was creating expectations for people. So Apple went through this huge phase of really changing the mindset of what you can do with a device, how easy it could be to use, making it work very flawlessly and seamlessly. And now me as a user, I'm starting to have expectations that Apple's not keeping up with.
Well, the thing that's hard is that it creates mixed expectations. So if you're using Apple's technology, if you're using PhotoStream, that wouldn't happen. But because you're using a third-party app,
sure, they
don't let third-party apps have access to the battery willy-nilly. They only have 3 full process background APIs, one for audio, one for VoIP, and one for navigation, and anything else will get timed out because they don't want 8 apps. They figure you're not smart enough to control 8 apps using the internet all at once, and your battery will run down, and you'll be angry at Apple that your battery sucks. And they'd rather you be upset with the Dropbox app than you're upset with Apple. And that choice might have been good in 2010 for non-sophisticated users, but there's no override for people in 2012 who know what they're doing with their phones.
But they don't care enough about me to, you know, just make the phone slightly thicker and give me a bigger battery either.
No, they believe that thinness is a feature.
No, and that's my thing. Like, I really think Apple makes some decisions. It's actually funny because, you know, there's that interview with Steve Jobs where he's talking about at Apple, we hire artists and musicians and all these people. And this is what, you know, makes our product so awesome. And then I think about RIM and I'm like, we hire engineers, a lot of engineers, a lot of engineers. If you think about the BlackBerry experience, it's very utility focused historically, right? It's like engineers thinking about shortcuts and the most efficient path to getting something done. And, you know, that resonates with me. That's okay. I'm like, I think Apple needs more engineers maybe right now, involved. And I'll be curious to see what happens with, Forstall gone in the next year.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that Steve Jobs' famous saying was that Apple sits at the crossroads of, science and the liberal arts. And there's that talk from Rand's Michaluk, who said that every good company needs an engineer to make stuff, an artist, or a designer to make the interface between that stuff and the humans, and a dictator to make the choices as to, you know, the choices between both of them at every stage of the game. And Apple had that under Steve Jobs. Arguably, Microsoft doesn't have that with Steve Ballmer. RIM has that with Torsten Hines. So and maybe it's not always the CEO. Maybe it's somebody maybe it was Scott Forstall until now. Maybe now it'll be Johnny Ive. But Apple made a lot of choices, and making choices means that those choices are not going to be good for every user. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with iOS 7 now that, Johnny Ive is in charge of human interface and Craig Federighi is now in charge of OS 10 and iOS, the whole shebang. And
I want to see if Apple can surprise people. I mean, one of the things I think that was a prevailing thought with iPhone 5 is they didn't take any risks. And I mean, I find it really funny. They rebuilt the phone from the ground up.
Yes.
Re-engineered everything to build exactly the same product. And honestly, this was my take with the iPhone 5 was for the first day, I was like, oh yeah, it's cool. It looks really nice, etc. However, I have to stick it in a case anyways because it's too slippery and a little too actually small, like narrow, to use without a case. I find it's easier to use the phone. Like literally it has a better utility of use when I stick a skin on it.
I just hollow out a Galaxy S3 and use that as a case.
Well, you probably could, right? But I find it funny. Like it's okay. So they rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up just to build it exactly the same. Because once you put a case on it, and honestly, unless you compare the two phones side by side, you don't know the difference.
One's taller.
So yeah, but again, only if you have the other one there to compare to it. I'm not sure the average person on the street will notice that, one from the other. So.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. And you have said that we will, once BlackBerry 10 launches, we are going to do the first round robin. We're not sure what we're going to call it yet, but all the editors are going to go mano a mano with all the phones.
Yeah, something more Mobile Nations branded we need. Round robin doesn't really make sense, but we'll come up with something for that. And no, I think it'll be interesting. And I mean, I've been doing very much my personal round robin lately. I think my fanboyism is dead right now. I have enthusiasm for BlackBerry, but it's
an educated enthusiasm.
It's an educated enthusiasm. Absolutely. And as I use each of the platforms, I'm really sort of evaluating them, trying to figure out, not just how it is for me, but who's it for? How will different people perceive it? And, what do they love about it, like about it, hate about it? And it's interesting because all the platforms I think right now have somebody who they appeal to. And I feel like there's a little bit of a lack of education in the mass consumer market about that right now. I think that, Apple's lucky right now because I think the mass market thinks the iPhone's for everybody. And it is for a lot of people. There's no argument about that. But I hope what we see in 2013 is more understanding from people about who these platforms are for, who the devices are for. And, that's my goal. I want to see BlackBerry 10 hit and I want it to be clear to the average person on the street who that device is for and what it's good at and why somebody will love it and why somebody might not like it. But that doesn't mean it's bad or that, oh my God, BlackBerry sucks compared to Android and iPhone. It's like, no, this is what this device kicks ass at. This is what it's okay at. iPhone's good at this. Here's what iPhone's kind of
This screwdriver is a terrible hammer.
Yeah, Android is really interesting because it's, it's such a big hot mess, but there is some hotness buried in there for sure if you have the time and energy to kind of take its clothes off and put it together the way you want. Windows Phone, it's a little too...
Yeah, that's next for you, right? Like, this is the world tour. Now you're moving on to Windows Phone.
Exactly. So on Friday, I actually picked up a Lumia 920 on Rogers here in Winnipeg. Pretty interesting. Just buying that device shows you how messed up that ecosystem is right now. Because literally, I think 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago almost, basically some Rogers stores in Canada got shipments of the Lumia 920. And I went to a store that day in Winnipeg. The Rogers store had 3 of these things in stock. They sold 2 on pre-orders. They had 1 sitting there. They wouldn't sell to me because they said a person came in who was trying to buy it. They had some account issues and he's coming back tomorrow to pick it up. And I offered like $100 extra bonus. I'm like, here, I'll give you a tip. Just sell it to me. They wouldn't do it. After that, we called every Rogers dealer every single day. We called in on the phone lines. It wasn't coming in. People either didn't know what it was. The stores would say to call the support. Support would say check with the stores. Nobody knew anything that was going on. Just a complete mess. And then Friday, finally, we found a store that had 2. I picked it up. Huge phone. I mean, what's crazy about the Lumia 920 is in all the photos leading up to its release, I knew it was a bigger phone. I had no understanding that it was that big of a phone. It's a brick, like I don't mind a bricky heavy phone, but to say it's not a brick is to lie. Like it is a honking device in your hand. I mean, if I threw it at someone and smoked them in the head, it would do serious damage. but it's good. And then Windows Phone 8 is different. I mean, I'm looking at Windows 8 on computers. I'm using it here.
Oh, before you go on, like they made the opposite choice from Apple. You said like Apple made it so thin, you would have rather it been a bit thicker. No, like Apple's camera was totally re-engineered, not to be better, but to fit in a thinner phone. And Nokia made the opposite choice. They made their phone thick and beefy and actually floated the lens because they had all that extra space and put more battery in. They made that opposite choice.
Yeah, the Lumia 920 feels like, I don't even know if the word phone or smartphone is fitting for it. It feels more like, and I mean, the word device is so nondescript, right? But it's like, it's a device. Like this thing is, I don't know, it's a meaty device. And I mean, it has some cool features because it's actually the Cadillac. Like wireless charging, it has your NFC, it has a touch screen that you can use with gloves or your fingernails. It has offline GPS, for example. It has a lot of bells and whistles on the hardware perspective. Has the big display, but it's a big device. And then Windows Phone 8, I'm just really trying to figure out, other than Jessica Alba, who it's built for still. I mean, obviously, if you're hard into that Microsoft ecosystem and you have an Xbox and you're into Windows, sure.
You want a really good daytime camera or motion video camera.
Yeah, there's features, but the operating system is kind of weird. Like they really, again, this whole utility thing, in my head, I kind of think of Microsoft as a utility company, right? Like, think of all their operating systems. They've never been sexy. They've always been focused on
Windows XP.
Yeah, it's just get stuff done. Not necessarily glamorous, but you learn how to use it. It works. Some stuff is stupid, but it's never been about looking beautiful. And now with this whole Metro UI, they're really trying to look beautiful. And I'm a little concerned so far that they swung so far into falling in love with Metro UI that they've stepped too far away from the utility side of getting things done efficiently.
It's going to be a little bit more constraining than anything.
It is a constraining UI, and it's elegant looking, but it's not necessarily elegant to use yet. I find myself like the operating system is working against me getting things done fast in some cases. Now, you can still get everything done, like I said before. Like once any of these new mobile operating systems of today, you can figure out how to use it. But there's just little things, like, again, having 4 emails in my inbox and not being able to change.
And what kills me, they had the Halo 4 launch, one of the biggest Microsoft product launches of the year. Absolutely no Windows Phone tie-in. If I ran that company, Windows Phone 8 special, they wouldn't even call it X Phone Halo 4 edition would have been sitting on the shelf right next to the iPhone 5 and the Galaxy S3. And I bet tons of Xbox lovers would have just ran to that phone with whatever version of Halo they slapped on it.
They would have sold some for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, it's really interesting. And, there you have you're like Android, where you're going to have multiple companies building the hardware. They're going to compete against each other as much as they're going to compete against Android and iPhone and BlackBerry and everybody else. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but I just find it interesting that Microsoft, based on their sort of enterprise footprint, could have really built a phone geared at the professional users. And instead, they sort of, in my opinion, have gone after consumers, because I don't think this is a phone that's going to appeal to professionals. But it's
not the Office phone, and it's not the Halo phone.
Well, what I want to see is after a month of use, if somebody says to me, which phone should I buy? Can I give them reasons to really say, go for a Windows phone over Android or an iOS device for the average person? I think BlackBerry, the positioning is going to really be very clear when it comes out. I mean, yes, there's always going to be consumers, but they have a lot of hooks for that professional user. I mean, they're going to say, we have the best keyboards, whether touchscreen or physical keyboard. Whether or not it's completely true, they can absolutely get away with that message because there's enough they've done in that keyboard. It works 1 thumb or 2 thumbs. You can swipe up. It's fast.
I just want them to change their name to BlackBerry so I don't have to remember to say RIM every time.
What's really funny? They've already changed their business cards. So Torsten Heinz's business card, the CEO, the CMO, the lawyer, everybody, BlackBerry. There's no RIM on the business card. So
awesome.
The new CMO is basically burying the RIM name. You could already today, it's fine. Just call it BlackBerry as a company, unless you're talking specifically about the stock symbol.
I'm doing that.
You can literally just call it BlackBerry because that's honestly what they want to happen. The name RIM is completely behind the scenes.
Awesome. You made me happy, Kevin. You gave me something this podcast. I love that.
Okay. Well, let me go through my list quick here. Let me scan if there's things. Okay. Things I hate about the iPhone 5. I just want to show people it's like a very long list of stuff.
Hold on. I'll put you full screen so they can truly appreciate it.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I hope the swears don't come through. Oh, it's going to be a little whited out, but it's okay. Okay, let me go through quick. I talked about swiping on the keyboard. I talked about Yeah, the skinniness of the phone is hard for two thumb typing, but I can get away with one. Oh, here's a question. I sent a tweet one day and then it didn't send, but it said it was saved as a draft. But where the F do you find saved Twitter drafts?
Were you using like a client like Tweetbot?
No, I was using the built-in whatever.
Ah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
There
should not be drafts.
I could not find where it saved my draft that it didn't send. I think that was a lie.
There are drafts in Tweetbot, but I do not believe there are drafts in iOS.
Oh, the alarm clock app sucks. So like you have to hit that edit key, which is an extra tap. Like why not just tap on it and take you into edit mode? And then one feature on Android that I love is once you set your alarm, it tells you, okay, alarm set, it'll go off in 7 hours and 32 minutes from now. Apple doesn't do that. And one time I set the wrong alarm because I accidentally adjusted the weekend. I have a weekend and weekday event one set up. I hit the wrong one. I missed a flight home. And it was all the iPhone's fault because it could have just said, hey, this alarm's going to go off 5 days from now. And I would have realized I accidentally changed the time on the weekend one and not the weekday one. So that was kind of ridiculous. They could fix that. I don't know why they make such a slippery phone that they know everybody's going to put a case on. And also this iPhone 5 scratch is really easy. So I have a little scratch on it. So I don't know why they don't just design a phone that could work without a case. You know, go for some soft touch, make it so you don't have to cover it up so much with gouty cases.
See, I don't mind that so much because I can change the gouty case. If the actual phone, like some of the competing phones have soft touch built on, but I prefer to choose my own.
Okay, this one goes into your cloud stuff. So the SMS iMessage integration is crap, the way that's all integrated together. And the problem I had is that, you know, me and a bunch of friends have iPhones when we're using this. So we're getting iMessage, but then occasionally it switches back to text, especially when I was in the States and they were back in Canada. All of a sudden our iMessage kind of fell apart when roaming on AT&T or something. But I still assumed my messages were getting through when they were switching back to text. So the next day I get on the phone. It's like, why have you been ignoring me for 12 hours? Like, what have you been doing in New York? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been messaging you the whole time. Well, I didn't get any messages. And we went through our histories together. I'm like, messages weren't going through. And we had no idea because we thought they were going through. So that was garbage. Oh, this was really interesting. So the ability when you're on a hotel Wi-Fi. So I go to a hotel. I connect to their Wi-Fi through their, you know, it was they had free Wi-Fi, but you had to connect to the hotel lobby. So everything was running through Wi-Fi, which is what I wanted because I was roaming. However, when that hotel Wi-Fi connection timed out, it wasn't smart enough to then default back to the radio. So all my apps quit working. And it took me hours to realize what was going on because everything looked like it was connected still. Like the Wi-Fi was still full bar strength. Everything looked connected. No, it wasn't using data. It was trying to use Wi-Fi, which was now cut out. So that really made me mad because I'm pretty sure on BlackBerry that is smart enough not to do that. Undiscoverable features are still there for such an easy to use OS, which I found really interesting. So with BlackBerry 10, after you take a photo in the photo app, there's that little thumbnail in the bottom left corner. And it's cool because if you tap on it and pull it up, it like snaps into a zoom into the photo you just took. And I thought that was all brilliant. And then somebody messages me after I talked about how brilliant I thought that was. And they're like, well, on the iPhone, you can just swipe back to the left and you're right into the photo app. And I'm like, I've never known that was there.
Yeah.
And then I go to Adam and Blaze, who all use iPhones, and they're like, we never knew that was there either. And I'm like, we've all had several iPhones over the years, and none of us knew you could swipe left.
Oh, it's new. I mean, it's only since the last version of when they introduced the quick camera actions, they introduced those gestures. But I mean, they don't tell anybody that you can take a screenshot. If it wasn't for blogs, no one would know you could take a screenshot yet.
I guess so. Yeah, that's a good point. So, anyways, I was like, I didn't know that was there, and I missed it probably in your review. Although I did scan your review and read most of it, but I missed that piece. I still find BlackBerry is the best after you land at an airport, and especially if you switch countries for data to come up.
I just reboot my phone.
Yeah, Android's even worse though. You know, Android, you like have to reboot the phone.
Yeah.
The iPhone I find is not horrible, but not awesome.
It's slow.
Oh, when plugged in charging, why doesn't it tell me what percentage it is recharged? I have to unplug it to see the percentage.
Yes.
What the shiz is that?
Apple hates you.
Apple hates me.
Yeah.
I really hate that I can't reset the snooze time when it goes off.
Yep.
Like when it pops up, just like let me scroll left or right and say 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Why can't you fix that? Like seriously, Rene, just fix it.
I'm making a list. Johnny Ive is going to get a full list from us.
Okay, typing in the Skype app,
Mm-hmm.
how come the keyboard auto correction doesn't work anymore? And it's using Skype's lack of, like, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's Skype's bad. The autocorrection is available to every app. They just have to allow it.
Got it. Okay, so Skype sucks.
Yes.
Microsoft hates me then.
Yes, Microsoft hates you too.
Oh, this one I really hated. So I had a conference call that I had to take the other day, but I was in a hotel. So I pulled up in the calendar app the conference call details, which on a BlackBerry I can tap from there, and it'll automatically dial me in, put in the pause, dial that, confirmation number. Hell's no with the iPhone. I had to copy and paste manually back into the phone.
You can do it. It's just you've got to put in those commas and semicolons.
Okay, so the people who sent the invite hated me in that case.
Yeah, or they didn't structure the invite to automatically do your work for you.
Yeah, and we already complained about the lack of universal charging.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing with the standards, like, it's a beautiful connector, the Lightning connector. I love it, but
when you don't have one.
I would take the utility of having ugly micro USB over that only, isn't both direction working over.
There's an adapter that's not available in North America that lets you use micro USB.
Got it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay. So that's the main stuff there. I mean, I just wanted to vent on that list. And oh, this was awesome. So the iMessage, this was actually crazy. So now I got the Lumia 920 on Friday. I take the Nano SIM, another
Apple innovation.
Here.
People say Apple doesn't innovate. Look what they've done for you.
They innovate things to tick off people. It's awesome. So luckily Blaze had a nano to micro adapter, which I then stuck in the Lumia 920. So immediately, to me in my brain, that's now my device of choice. Mm-hmm. However, my iPhone was still connected on Wi-Fi. And I left it, I think, at the office that night. And Erica, in the meantime, on her iPhone is texting me, and it's still coming through iMessage to my iPhone. So I'm not getting any of her messages because I guess it just sees that there's a contact connected with.
Well, there's two things, because iMessage can use either email addresses or phone numbers. If she's sending to your phone number, it'll go to your new phone. If you're sending to your email address, it'll still go to your iPhone.
Well, I guess that's what it's doing, but it should have known that there was no SIM card in it anymore and said.
Well, no, I have to explain this because you're not used to multiple devices being able to get the same information. Any text that she sends to your email address will go to your iPhone, your iPod Touch, your iPad, your iPad Mini, anything that has the same iCloud ID logged in. And you can, even your Mac, you can respond to anything on your Mac now as well. It doesn't work great, but it works.
Yeah, I haven't actually been using that on my Mac yet, which maybe I'll play with. I do have a beautiful 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina, which I have been quite enjoying.
Such an Apple fanboy.
Renee, I probably own more Apple gear than most of your.
I know. I'm
probably, maybe you're the only one who would beat me. I mean, I got a lot of crap over the years.
That's what I like. You are not speaking out of a point of hate. I just want to make that absolutely clear. You are speaking as an educated iOS user.
I'm looking at a pimped out MacBook Pro Retina running two, what are they called? LED cinema displays.
Thunderbolt displays.
I've got all the iPads. I give them away as gifts when the new one comes out to family members. Yep. And yeah, no, I spend a lot of, honestly, I've probably spent more on Apple stuff by far than RIM stuff over the last 5 years, simply because RIM only sells, phones and most of my playbooks I got for free. Although at $129 though for a playbook, people should be, that's like 3 iPad minis now.
I wrote that article.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, honestly, even, I think at $129, people are like, you know what? The web browser is good enough on it. I can read, I can download books onto it. Take it to the beach. If somebody steals it, you're not going to cry. Use it on the treadmill. You drop it. Nobody's going to cry.
I saw a bunch of kids playing with one at a restaurant. Great distraction. Yeah. Bigger than an iPod Touch. The whole family can enjoy it.
Yeah, $129. It's pretty compelling. Now, I don't think they're making any money on that, of course, but for a consumer purchase, it's pretty compelling at that.
All right, Kev. So we're going to do a Mobile Nations podcast now that everybody is back later this week, and we'll talk more about the complete story. But for now, where can people find out more about you and more about BlackBerry 10?
Sure. You can find me on crackberry.com. Every day we're talking BlackBerry 10, but you can go to /tag/BlackBerry-10 for all the latest stories. Oh, wait, no, we put up a countdown clock now.
Yep.
Just look for the countdown clock at the top of the site and you're good to go. Awesome. There's lots of linkage to BlackBerry 10 stuff there. I'm on the Twitter at crackberrykevin. I'm even on Instagram because when I was using my iPhone 5, I took lots of Instagram pictures and my handle there is crackberrykevin.
Very nice.
And yeah, and I'm around. You'll find me.
Just yell loudly.
Just yell. You'll find me.
And you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can email us at podcast@imore.com or just leave a comment on the show when it goes live. For all of our shows, go to mobilenations.com/shows. Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. You're very knowledgeable about smartphones. You criticize because you care. And if people find this, like, they can say it's anti-Apple or Apple hate, but I think it's always good to look at things through fresh eyes and, give honest feedback.
I don't think I have any hate for Apple though in this. It's all legit.
No, absolutely.
Make it better. So I hate on RIM just as much when I have to.
Hate on RIM. Awesome. Sir, have a great evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Rene.
Thank you, chat room. You're a bunch of incredibly handsome, incredibly intelligent people. We have the best community in MobileCast. Actually, the best community on the internet.
I don't disagree. And I think now with Mobile Nation's Passport, it's getting really awesome. I can't believe the number of people now who've, just sent unsolicited emails. They're like, so I tried that login thing you guys are talking about. It's awesome.
It's the best login of any website I've ever used. And I'm not just saying that because we built it.
Well, and especially too, if you join as a new member today, the easy use to join any of the sites and join in is just unbelievable. It makes me want to launch a lot more sites now because I'm like, wow, click done.